As a society, we tend to celebrate the end results of things and not process or failures. Applies to everything. In our own profession, we like when you get a journal published or a grant, that's yay, but we don't celebrate how many grants you applied to that you didn't get, right? You're trying lots of things and lots of them are failing. We don't really write about any of those designs that fail. We only write about the ones that ended up in the market. And so we are doing this to ourselves, where we have this culture of only celebrating final work in progress.
Welcome to the Thrive with Cate Stillman podcast, made for you by us.
Hey, it's Kate with the Thrive with Kate podcast, and I'm excited today to speak to Barry Kudrowitz, who is the head of the Design Innovation Department at University of Minnesota. Go Minnesota. I went to Carleton College, and I have a couple events coming up in December in Minnesota, so I'm excited to be connecting with Minnesotans. So with product design, I mean, you have this book, Sparking Creativity, How Play and Humor Fuel Innovation and Design, and I really thought that's what we could dive into today. And I have some like real specific questions about how do we take something that we have a great idea, like how do we bring that into the marketplace? So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to talk to you about all this stuff. That's essentially what we're teaching students to do in our classes. How do you take your own ideas from concept to bringing it to people? So I don't even know where to begin. I mean, in that grand, that's basically all of our degree programs. So, but at a high level, it's design process, design thinking, and there's user research and market research and idea generation, testing ideas with people, prototyping, iteration.
I'll start with a question.
Okay.
I'm curious how you're going to answer this question, but it's like, where do ideas come from?
Right. Yeah. So there is a great book on this by Stephen Johnson, Where Good Ideas Come From. And he has several theories on that. I have, I like this associative theory of creativity, which says that creativity is about making non-obvious connections, and all new ideas are some sort of merging of something. If it's not bringing two things together, it might be taking something and putting it into a new context or using it in a different market or for a different user. But this non-obvious combining of thoughts is what leads to new ideas and newness.
It reminds me of a book, I think it's out of Columbia Business, it's Strategic Intuition, which is that idea of like, you're an expert over here in this thing and you're an expert over here in this thing. And because of that, you're bringing these ideas together, or you're bringing these expertise or connections, and it creates based on, it's like idea sex, right?
Yeah. So there's this, this study that found that if you're in larger cities, you're more likely to run into other people and make interesting connections, and therefore you are more creative just by being in a bigger city, or being around other people. And I get it. That's how you learn new things and how you make interesting connections to stuff you're not already doing.
Yeah.
And so it makes, one of the personality factors that correlates with creativity is extroversion. And
openness. This is like the big 5 personality scale. You've got openness and extroversion as like those big.
Yeah. Openness to experience and extroversion.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, I'm an extrovert, but that that might be offensive to some introverts to be like, well, you're not creative, introverts. But it's not necessarily about talking to people. It's about exposure to things and ideas. And so you might be an introvert and you scroll Pinterest or something, or you read a lot of news articles. And that's another way of being exposed to a lot of different cultures and concepts. But extroverts do it all the time. They do it like on the elevator, you know, and at parties and stuff, and naturally bumping into other viewpoints.
I would think openness would also be critical, because if we look at like conscientiousness as follow through or doing what we've already done better, maybe is a way of looking at conscientiousness, whereas openness might be more around seeing other ways of doing things.
Yeah, and they're both important, right? So you can't just be extroverted and not be open to doing things differently. So there are definitely extroverts who they just like socializing, and it's not really about changing the way you do stuff or imagining things being different. So you kind of need both. You need that mindset that questions, is there another way to do this? And also, I'm open to doing it a different way. And, you know, like, do you go the same place every year on vacation? Do you go to the same and when you're at the same restaurant, do you order the same thing every time? Or do you try the special, right? That's like openness to new things. And that mindset is really important for not just for picking stuff on a restaurant menu. It's also just in general, the idea that you are seeking newness and maybe things to be different, or that things could be different.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm just thinking of, because I'm also like, my personality type has futurist in it. And so I think for those of us who maybe are naturally more in the future than in the present, just in the way at our awareness works, that, and then I look back at like, oh, right, I started podcasting before it was normal, like in 2007, or selling online courses, you know, in the aughts, you know, before the double digits, and just how the market wasn't ready. And this is another big question that I had. I love in design thinking how we have like think big, test small, fail fast, learn always. And sometimes those of us that have, you know, the big idea and we just go into think big, test small, right? The market, like market readiness. So selling an online course in 2007 for over $1,000 was a really different beast than in 2024, 2025, when a lot of people have had experiences, a number of experiences of using their credit card on the internet. Whereas 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that was edgy behavior to use your credit card for something that was on the internet. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this, like radical versus incremental change, and like what we're capable of, especially as we're entering like the AI sphere. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, everything around us today, this Zoom call that we're on right now was radical at some point. I mean, the size of these headphones right now, headphones that go in your ear, right? That was radical at some point. The size of this microphone that I'm talking into, all of this is radical, was radical. And now it's just normal. We don't even think about it. It's just, well, that's my headphones, right? And I'll set up a Zoom for you, and it's just normal. But this was
annoying when it doesn't work, right? So it goes from just unbelievable to just annoying if it's not perfect.
Yeah, the expectations, right? It's the norm. And but we forget. We because of a series of incremental changes, we gradually become used to the new norm, and things that were once radical become commonplace. And it's a little bit like that example from Devil Wears Prada, where the blue cardigan or something.
Oh yeah,
something. Was once at high fashion, and then now it's in everyday use wear, right? But that applies to everything. All things that could be viewed as technology, And sometimes we, just like we don't realize we're getting older, we don't realize that technology, get better and better. And until you look back and you look back at like the old TV set that you were using and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that was the quality of television that we were looking at. Or, anything like Olympic equipment. If you look back at like the skis and you're like, hey, can you believe they were skiing on that? Or, everything, like getting prescription glasses, the whole process of surgery, right? What we used was, I have so many examples in the book of these things that are just now normal.
And I'm just kind of curious about this because like I was just talking to someone who didn't do market research and they're kind of wondering why their product is not meeting the marketplace. And I'm not like this huge fan of market research, but having like some idea about what's going on can be a good idea in terms of knowing where you're going to sell something as you make something and knowing some of the expenses and overhead and that. And I guess I'm kind of coupling that with, my guess is we're changing, like we're picking these incremental changes that we're making are happening at a much more rapid pace. That's my guess, and I'm curious about that. I guess I'm kind of curious about that with AI, or is it just like a small group of people that's making more rapid changes more quickly?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's talked about AI, and I think we had versions of this, right? We had like spell check, for example, and that was a form of this in some ways.
Yeah,
and even before that or after that, we had like how do you want to start this email? And it gave you some suggestions for responses like, oh, sounds good, thanks, right? And so there was some of that. Even like the autofill in Google where you'd start typing like someone's name and then it would be like, do you mean this, right? And then even like automated voice conversation where you call like the pharmacist and you're like, tell me what you're trying to do, and then it'll interpret, and I think you want to talk to a pharmacist, right? So we had some incremental things there. I think it's just, it maybe took like we went from that to, make me an illustration of a cat with laser beam eyes, on top of the Statue of Liberty, and then it would like do it and it would look good. And like you'd be like, oh, that's amazing, right? And so we might have made like a little bit of a radical jump there from a series of incremental steps in AI to something a little bit more. We said, oh my gosh, wow, okay, computing can do a little bit more than what we expected, and everyone had access to it. It wasn't like companies that had a lot of money were able to use this type of computer first, right? It was just anyone can log in to ChatGPT and like use the software. So it might be more akin to like Edison was called the Wizard of Menlo Park because he had this way of recording sound and playing it back. And so this was not a thing. Like you couldn't record sound before. Right. And then he made this way of capturing the sound waves onto a drive or like a rotating drum, and then you could play it back and you could hear what you recorded. And that was magic. People didn't understand. They thought he was a wizard, right? This was like magic kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just science. It's science, right? And it was a major leap in technology. People didn't fully understand what they were seeing. But then they got used to it and they said, oh, okay, we could record sound now. Yeah. And I think this might be akin to that, like in comparing AI to the first time we recorded sound. where there is science behind it. It's it's not magic, but it is impressive.
And so connecting that when you're working with students and they create something that the market's not ready for, like how does that work? Or how do you think about that? Or is it a marketing issue?
I mean, I wish my students were creating ideas that the market is not ready for. I mean, we try to teach them to push it out into the future.
Yeah.
But, often, students are working more in the 5-year frame of the future and not the 10, 15, 20 year out into the future.
And you're mostly it's mechanic, like there's mechanical engineering involved in what you're working with them on in general.
Sometimes. I mean, my background's in mechanical engineering, but some of the products are digital. They might be doing an app concept and there's nothing physical at all.
Okay, so let's take the app concept. So with the app concept, so say someone creates a really, really cool thing, right? A really cool app that's unique. And how much, I guess what I'm wondering is this, it's like how much goes into creating the app versus trying to get the app to market? Like how much more time, energy, and attention is into just getting people to buy the thing, to know about the thing, exposure, et cetera. And then how much creativity needs to go into that part of the process versus the making part. Because I feel like in my world, there's this like assumption that if I make it, it will sell. And then it often doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, there's like tests early with users and have them involved throughout the process. So that if you decide to go to launch, that you've been getting the feedback that people want this all along. And you don't get to a fully functional prototype without having many people that could be users say that they want this. And so I think that's a part of teaching design process, is that you have to engage potential end users throughout the entire process and not just at the end. That's setting yourself up to fail or to be really frustrated. It's a lot of, and so, when early stage design, actually my lecture tomorrow is on sketch modeling or lo-fi prototyping. The students are going to be making paper apps of a concept and paper prototypes of something to test an idea. And that's so important because right now, like you could draw on it, you could tear it up, you could change everything, and it doesn't cost anything because it's Post-it notes. But when you start investing time into developing a functional interface with a menu or a physical product, then that's a lot of time and materials that will be wasted, right? And so it's just teaching students to have the user involved in the process at every stage.
Yeah.
There's a good quote in here. Frank Lloyd Wright: "You can use an eraser on the drafting table or a sledgehammer on the construction site."
Yeah. I've seen it with my neighbors. Yeah. It's huge.
So yeah, just, it iterate sooner, test with sketches, test with drawings and paper models before going to higher fidelity.
That is the issue. I think that really covers I was just talking to someone an hour ago who's done a ton of investment in building this Ayurvedic medicine app. And I'm like, who's it for? What are the competitive apps in that space? Like, how much are people really paying for that now? And it was not developed with users. And there's a part in what we do in Wellness Pro Academy where people are designing basically online wellness clubs based on habits. If we know that habits drive health, and the data is more or less in on like diet and lifestyle drives health. and those are habits. So if we have habit-driven clubs, we also know that like people who hang out with people that have better habits adopt better habits because we're an ultra social species. Right? And so the process, like I try to just get them like just launch, like think big, test small, fail fast, learn always. Like let's just get to the point where you're working with people on habits, you know, on very specific circadian rhythm habits. We know they work for everyone in the species, and learn along the way. So it's like learning along the way. The tendency, because a lot of people I work with are not in student mode, like they're more in like career professional mode where they've been good at what they've done for a long time. I find it hard to break that pattern of it needs to be perfect for someone to use it. It needs to be done. I need to build the whole thing before I have members. And I try to do this whole pre-sell formula, like get them like, no, like, let's just, like, we just want an iteration. We want something to edit. Like, let's just get you involved. Like, let's stop making this into a really, really big thing. And I love it. Like back out into the paper app mode of it.
Yeah.
So how do I break them of that pattern?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think as a society, we tend to celebrate the end results of things and not process or failures.
Yeah.
And, you know, applies to everything. Like we're in our own profession, when you get a journal published or a grant, that's yay, but we don't celebrate how many grants you applied to that you didn't get, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe like you're trying lots of things and lots of them are failing. We don't really write about any of those designs that fail. We only write about the ones that ended up in the market. And so we are doing this to ourselves, where we have this culture of only celebrating final work in progress.
Yeah.
I think some design shows are getting a little bit better at this, like Top Chef or Project Runway or Drag Race, where they're sort of more of the emphasis is on the process. And they're, you know, you get to see them making clothing or figuring out the dish. And then some of the show is on the critique of the food or whatever, that runway show. But it's equally about process, and it's also about final work.
And so I'm guessing tracking in there helps. So say, for example, if I just go back into my prior example, is one of the lessons that they need to do, we call it low-hanging fruit, where they need to talk to past clients about their idea. So if we have them tracking that, like set a target of like aim for whatever, 5 or 10 of those conversations within the first week of joining our paid program, right? Then we would want to celebrate that. We want to celebrate the number of conversations because we know those conversations are going to be good data collection. They're going to learn faster, fail faster on testing some of their prior ideas. Is that?
Well, I think this goes back to my work on play and creativity. What makes something play is that it's process focused, not results focused. So if you're doing something for the end result, that's work. That makes something work. And so if you want to view something as play, you have to actually enjoy doing the activity, doing the prototyping and the testing along the way. If you're only doing it to have successful product or podcast episode or fame or whatever, you are making that work. And so in my research, I found that if you view an activity as play, you are more creative in that activity by a lot. And there's other studies that have found that as well. So if you can change the focus to be about the process and how do you enjoy the process regardless of what the outcome is, not only will you view the activity more as play, but you're going to be more creative in that activity as well.
That's huge. I feel like I'm taking notes because if I could change it's almost like how to have these conversations if I just stay with the same example, so that it's just fun. It's just fun to talk to people you've worked with in the past and being in beginner's mind and curiosity and not necessarily need to check all the boxes with it. Like you're saying, at that point, they're going to be in a flow state. They're going to be receptive. They're going to be more creative. They're going to be a better listener.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of like, I don't know how many bands are doing it because it's like, we're going to make money and we're going to be famous. I don't really like any of you guys or making music, but that's my goal. Right. And then, they're usually, they're doing it because they love the people they're working with. They like making music, and then good things come out of it.
Yeah.
And that could be the same as a design team or any team in any sort of culture. You have to figure out how to get the people wanting to be part of this culture and part of the community, and then good things will happen.
Right.
First, you shouldn't lead with, we expect X deliverables or any deliverables. I mean, you have to have something, but it shouldn't be about the deliverable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it reminds me a little bit too of, I mean, with fail fast, the fail fast, learn always part. It's like the wipeout videos, right? Like whatever the example that comes to mind, we live in Mexico part-time. And so we're going to Mexico. And what I notice so much in being a parent is like the whole Carol Dweck's work on fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And that people have an expectation that they should be good at something without, the 10,000 iterations, without all the wipeouts. So with like surfing, and it's like, can we celebrate the wipeouts just as much as whatever, the ride, right?
Yeah.
Because then what you're saying is like, if the learning how to wipe out is part of a process.
Right. Learning how to fall. Yep.
Learning how to fall.
Yeah. I remember I did karate or taekwondo for 10 years, I think. And we spent a lot of time learning how to fall. And I don't write about this at all, but, you practice getting pushed and then tucking and rolling and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't remember any of that. But then, it was maybe like 8 years ago, I was biking back from work.
Yeah.
Going really fast on my new road bike. And I think I caught my pedal caught something. I flew over the handlebars. I did my roll thing instinctively. I stood right back up. And I was like, whoa, how did I do that? So stuff kicked in. But yeah, I had flashbacks to karate, in that moment when the world slowed down. This is not exactly related to what you're talking about.
No, it's totally related. I mean, I was a goalkeeper and I was trained to dive and fall on the ground, and so then it's there that how to hit, right? Which might not be what people are looking at in a fight.
Yeah. We do this. I mean, that's what academia is, or at least in design, we're training you, we're giving you sometimes fake design challenges, sometimes real, but you're in this world where it doesn't matter. It's not like you're going to get fired from, you might get a bad grade, but you're not going to get fired from a company for, the concepts not being great or whatever. And so you have all of these opportunities to practice design and learn the techniques and come up with crazy stuff while you're in school, such that you'll be ready for strange types of challenges in the real world.
Yeah. Well, and I'm even thinking how to make certain activities that are particularly challenging more, how do we make sales more playful? Especially, I work with wellness professionals who are petrified of sales. They're amazing technicians, right? And so there's this, if we go to outcome versus process, like outcome is a sale, right? But if their process is wrong, the likelihood of the outcome becoming a sale is much less. So if the process is, if they can reward themselves or feel that intrinsic sense of play more from nailing certain parts of the process, and maybe the goal is just to qualify a lead and not qualify a lead. And so it's less about the sale in general and more about, is this person even qualified to be a solid member of my club? And kind of what I'm getting from you is like, there's a lot in mindset, but it's deeper than just mindset. It's really a huge shift in what is the most important parts to focus on.
Yeah, I guess as a leader of people, you might be doing reviews on people, and it's how do you take the reviews off of the final product, or the outcome, right? And then how do you make it about process? I think that
it's like everything comes down to how do you make it about process. If you want it to be engaging and fun and playful and not, or to enter the state of play.
Right. But we've as a society, in all through school, we're basically told it's about grades. It's about the end circle the right answer. And, don't mess up. And at the end of the class, you get a grade, and that's what matters. And that's it, right? As soon as you enter school age, that's all you get. And and that's how that transitions into work, where I don't know how to change everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we look at that in terms, I'm redoing so many processes right now with my team, and I'm like, how do we make this fun instead of just agonizing?
Yeah.
And
And there are, so I think I like the Montessori method of education, where it's self-directed. You have some control of how long you work on things and which things you work on, and there's natural ways of adding challenge when needed. Mm-hmm. And I think, and elevating, you progress through challenges at your own rate. And I think I haven't really talked about this, but something that is so critical to something being play is that there's this concept of flow, that the challenge matches the skill set. Mm. And if the challenge is too easy, you're going to be bored. And if the challenge is too difficult, you're going to be stressed out. Yeah. And in work and in school, and you don't necessarily get to choose the challenges. They you're given them. And so in a classroom setting, for example, every student in the room has a different skill set and different abilities. And so if everyone's getting the same challenge, some students, it might be right in that sweet spot, and they're going to be fully engaged, and it's going to be play, and they're going to be creative. Yeah. Some students, it's going to be too difficult, and they're going to be stressed out, and they're not going to be creative. And some students, it's going to be too easy, and they're not going to be challenged, and they're not going to be creative. And so, part of creating that environment for creativity and play is having the ability to have the individual match their challenge to their skill set and be able to evolve the challenge to always keep in that state of flow.
Yeah. It reminds me a bit of Kaizen, right? If anyone where skill meets challenge can find that next incremental improvement, because it seems like where we get out of flow with the challenge part is we choose something that is much more than incremental improvement, where it's maximal improvement from where they're starting at. And it reminds me too of the gap in the gain from Dan Sullivan's work of like, if you're measuring from where you started, you see your gain. If you're measuring against your ideal, you see your gap. If you're in gap thinking, we're back into fixed mindset where you're measuring against an ideal that is way out of reach. We're out of Kaizen. We're out of flow. Challenge exceeds skill.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Where do we go from there?
Well, it's just helpful for me you're helping me unpack, especially for those of us who are leading students or members or clients where someone is stuck or it's working for some people, but not other people. I think what we just broke down are some of the reasons why that is, and then how to step in and create some change there. So that it's more of it, so that someone can go back into flow, open to creativity, curiosity, and into incremental improvement in whatever it is that they're trying to do.
Yeah. Yep. But there's a lot of cultural, ways of doing things in academia and in industry that are very hard to fight, shift mindset.
It reminds me of this. I think it was some study on high school students in Japan versus the United States in math. And in math, in Japan, I guess it's collaborative. So you get to solve the problem together. And so because of that, the students are in a flow state where they're using different skills. Like someone might be great in communication, someone else might be just like really good at math. But the problem solving is different rather than so hyper individualized in the US, where it's like, keep your eyes on your own paper, don't talk to anybody, solve the problem by yourself, which is emphasizing a really different way of trying to figure out bigger problems for humanity in the future, right? Where it's like, right, if we're not collaborating, we're going to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. I haven't really thought through that about this. We're so collaborative in design, so they're and you have to be, because you can't launch a product by yourself without working with marketing, sales, packaging, engineers, right? It's part of design. There's very few people that are like a one person entrepreneur company that, maybe there's cases where you like making greeting cards or something on your own, but generally you have to work with other people. And so in all of our studio culture and our curriculum, there's a lot of team-based activities and crit with other people. But that was not the case. My education was in mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
So there was a design class in my undergrad, like one, but the rest of it was like, individual. You have to know the equations and you're tested on the equation. So I did a big shift into an entirely different academic culture.
And in that, what were some of the skills that you found like that were just such a, I guess, a missing part of like how you were successful in one area? Because this kind of happens to me in coaching people, where some people have like been really, really rewarded for being tactical or logistical or detail oriented, but what their next role demands is not necessarily that skill set. And I guess my like, just to add another layer onto this question, is like, how does play and humor fit into developing new skill sets?
Wow. Layers. So I think I'm a connector type of person. So when I pivoted, I've always figured out ways of kind of tying what I have done to what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And part of why I'm in this role is because the vision I had was a kind of this hybrid program between engineering and design. And so I created this program to be this in between kind of degree that didn't exist when I was looking for degrees. And so I made this thing modeled after industrial design engineering, which is how they teach industrial design in parts of Europe, where it is like in the middle of right brain, left brain, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So pivot to the other question, which was how does play and humor factor into what?
Well, I mean, when you have to pivot your skill set, right? So your example was you were trained in mechanical engineering, which is highly individual, right? Then you're in innovation and, like how do you make cool stuff, which is a group oriented activity. And I think what so many people face right now, at least I know in the people that I work with, is it's like new skill sets are in hot demand and seem to be in increasing hot demand going forward. So there can be a sense of stress with that, right? But your background is in how you do play and humor to fuel innovation and design. So like, how does someone like make that pivot? I'm not getting the part of it is like by focusing on the process of learning, like the process of learning the new skill, that will unlock a flow state. But I think, yeah.
Well, my PhD was actually on improv comedy.
Yeah.
In the mechanical engineering department at MIT. So I think there's probably some folks in the defense that were like, "Is this am I in the right room? What's going on here?" But this is, I was looking at how we can be better engineers, specifically with improv training, and this came out of this study I did at Delft in the Netherlands, where we were looking at what makes surprise in products appreciated.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm not going to go through all the study, but essentially when people can resolve whatever the surprising thing was, like make sense of it, then it's appreciated. But if you can't make sense of the incongruity, then it's just confusing and you don't like that. And so there's a lot, it's sort of like pivoted into joke theory or humor theory, right? And mapping creativity to humor. And so I started doing research in this area of like this relationship between humor theories and creativity theories. And there is a pretty strong overlap. There's the incongruity theory of humor is almost the same as the associative theory of creativity. They're both about, something is funny or something is creative if a non-obvious connection is made and people can make sense of it. It's the same theory, just said differently.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I wonder if, people who are good at being funny are also good at being creative in design.
Yeah.
And so we were having engineers and product designers come up with product ideas. And we found that actually professional improv comedians were coming up with better product ideas than product designers. And I was like, okay, well, what's happening here? Right. And so I started studying improv comedy or improv. I was taking improv courses, but I was really like secretly observing the trainers and trying to see how they were training. And if you boil down a lot of the stuff that they're teaching, it's about listening and building on ideas and coming up with wild ideas and encouraging wild ideas and deferring judgment. And it is essentially the same list of rules as brainstorming.
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry, this is going a big circle, but if you do improv warm-ups or workshops, you come up with more ideas than if you did other types of activities.
Yeah.
I definitely had a connection to what the original question was, but
well, just learning new skills. But we do this a lot at my live member events where we do improv because in an identity evolution, which has a lot to do with learning new skills, you can't have the same personality. Right. So it's if we go back to the example of how the kids learn math in Japan versus how the kids learn math in the United States, right? There's a different personality of a kid who's trying to get the answer right by themselves and the kid who's trying to solve a bigger problem with a group.
Yep.
And so that flexibility of character, which is the same thing as learning new skills or new ways of thinking, has a lot to do with practicing or being in process with trying something new, of like showing up in a different way in a situation. And that is essentially what I get out of with my groups doing improv.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much that you could pull from that into being a good team player, to being more creative, to being open to change, to being a change facilitator, to facilitating. I think the issue is improv has like a stigma to it, and people don't want to put themselves out there. They don't want to have to like put on a skit or pretend to be a character or be on a stage, because people fear being on stage more than death. And I think the problem is the people who need that most are the ones who are least likely to learn those skills.
Yeah.
And so, I think it has this, it needs a repackaging, and maybe calling it something else, maybe divorcing it from theater might be a way.
Yeah, totally. That's what we find is it's like, and it's exactly what you spoke to earlier, which is like we break it down into these little tiny processes that have nothing to do with stage, that happen in small groups and no one's watching. It's just playing.
Yep. And we do this all, like we all did this on the playground. Actually, everything right now, this is all improvised. This is improv. We walk into somebody on the street walking our dog, and we improvise a conversation. Nothing is scripted. I mean, some like a keynote talk would be scripted, but everything else generally is improvised. And so I think it's just, if we're trying to train people, it's not improv theater. It's not even improv comedy.
Yeah.
Because it's not, the goal is not to be funny. The goal is to be good at these skills that sometimes end up leading to humor.
Yeah.
Because it helps you make non-obvious connections. And that is often funny and it's often creative. Yeah. But those skills of being able to improvise are useful for everything. And it's part of play. And children learn that in play. They learn it on the playground. We just destroy that ability in school. We're like, no, we're not gonna play those games in the classroom.
What I'm also getting from this is like there's this level of, it's instinctual. It's not something that has to be learned. It's something that we do. It's just we do. And if I look at like my cat, I have a kitten, and I have an older cat, and I have a 4-year-old dog, and they're hilarious because the kitten will fall off shit all the time. Like it just biffs 10 times a day because it's like so everyone's laughing at the attempt and the fallout from just like, this is how we all are, right? Until it's trained out of us that, oh no, good kitten, you made the leap to the counter. Like no one says that. No one. I mean, sometimes we high-five her when she does something particularly miraculous, but okay. So I have another instinct-related question, and where I love the uncommon connections part. So in my research with primal habits and the habits that drove human brain development and all that, one of the things that my community really uncovered was urine therapy, which is so gross and so weird according to modern convention. So I, anyways, took like 2 years to read everything about it and do a bunch of research, and found that the reason it's arising in primates and the reason it works around across time, with different cultures, is because it is basically water that's high in nitrogen that's already been structured by the human body. So it's structured water. It's been in your blood plasma, and so it's a fingerprint, and it seems to nourish all the microbiomes of the body. So if you put it in your nose, it nourishes the sinus microbiome. If you put it in your mouth, it nourishes the mouth microbiome, and it separates dysbiosis from eubiosis. So it's a really easy way to clear dysbiosis, but it's crazy. It's crazy. So it's like this uncommon association. So what I did with this, because I'm an author, and I'm really more of a educator, community leader who finds books an effective way to communicate with a lot of people so that I don't have to say the same thing again and again and again. And so I was like, this is so crazy. I should just make a cartoon book, because it's easier for people to take something that's so disgust oriented, but that was trained just like, solving the math problem by yourself has been trained. Whereas like solving a problem together as a community unit doesn't need to be trained. We naturally do that. So how do we branch something that's so nuts? And so I'm kind of just curious on your thoughts with that, with normalizing something that used to be normal. Primates do it. It's normal for primates, but has been cultured out of us. Like, what are some ways that you would, if my goal here is to make something a little bit more, at least societally known, so that like the everyday person knows that you're a nurse, is the microbiome, here's the science, et cetera. Yeah.
So I think Squatty Potty did a really good job with this. So, for example, the natural way of pooping was in a field and you squat. And that's how our body organs are just organized. That's how everything is in a straight line. But at some point in time, when the first flushing toilet was invented, it was modeled after a chair, which is a thing that you sit on. And, that became the norm of toilet. It was a higher chamber pot or some sort. But it's not the ideal sitting position for your bowels. And so instead of using a squatting toilet, which they do in many parts of the world, we're not going to rip out the toilet in our house and put in a squatting toilet, because people would be like,
tried to order one. Like, it is so hard to order an Asian toilet in the United States. Like, you have to be incredibly wealthy to import one from Asia.
It's not a thing, right? We don't have the infrastructure. But also, like, if people come over your house, you have to be like, here's how you use the toilet. And then also, elderly folks have not been squatting their entire life, and so they can't actually use it anymore. So Squatty Potty was like, well, we'll just make a stool, and you tuck it under the seat, and then you push your feet up so you're back into a squatting position. But the problem is, talking about pooping is hard to do on like television and advertisements, because it's taboo still.
Yep.
And so the way they did it was with like a rainbow unicorn animatronic that pooped soft serve rainbow ice cream. Right. And they used humor and play to explain the concept. And I think it worked, and it was quite successful. And they're doing that now with Tushy, which is the bidet system. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's also a way of moving away from toilet paper, which is also again a taboo thing that I think is super wasteful and not efficient. And bidets exist, and they're much more efficient and a better product. But American,
way better for anus hygiene in general, like huge.
Yeah, it just doesn't. I mean, why not have this here? But we have to talk about it, and in order to talk about it, you have to figure out a way to introduce it without explaining poop particles and stuff, right? And so Tushy did a good job with that as well. I think, the leading figure in this, with Thomas Crapper, who basically was the first to make a toilet showroom where you could buy a toilet, and that was game change. Like, people were freaking out because you have a window display with a toilet in it, and that was like private stuff. Like, you didn't do that. That was not a thing. Yeah. And he made it okay to talk about owning a toilet. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I mean, I think there's...
What I'm getting from that, though, it's like, and it really goes back to the first thing that you said, which is these two camps, right? Like, I should look at people selling the taboo to mainstream culture in a way that's educating, especially around human waste products. So if I just decide to put my following like Josh Kaufman, first 20 hours, like 20 hours into that, so I can become a relative expert in how to bring this to market, that all of a sudden that's going to spark my creativity, and I'll naturally see the connections between how I want to educate people based on the science of urine therapy and the history of urine therapy to how the market might be able to receive that.
Yeah. I think it, like, play and humor sell, and it works well. Right. I mean, how many of the Arrow Awards are humor based?
Awesome. Thank you, Barry. It's been
Welcome.
super enlightening. Like, really, I just love this conversation. You've helped me a lot with, and hopefully other people listening, just in terms of like how to solve problems by sparking creativity. You guys, Barry's book, it's on Amazon. It's called Sparking Creativity: How Play and Humor Fuel Innovation and Design.
Thank you. This has been great.
Yay!